What if everything we think we know about the past is just a fraction of the real story? Picture entire civilizations that rose, created marvels we can barely comprehend, and then vanished, taking their most profound secrets with them. All around us, hidden in plain sight, are echoes of technologies so advanced, so brilliantly designed, that they defy the timelines we've written in history books. These aren't just myths or legends. They are tangible, physical mysteries left behind by people who understood the world in ways we are only beginning to grasp. Think about that for a moment. We live in an age of artificial intelligence and space exploration, yet we're still piecing together puzzles from thousands of years ago, puzzles that suggest we've only scratched the surface of human potential. This video is a journey into the shadows of history, where we'll uncover 21 astonishing technologies that vanished before they ever got a name. These are the innovations that slipped through the cracks of time, lost to war, natural disaster, or simply because the knowledge was too precious, too secret to write down. We're talking about everything from ancient analogs of computers that could predict celestial events to materials so strong and so beautiful that we still can't replicate them today. Each one of these discoveries challenges the narrative of linear progress. They whisper to us from across the centuries, suggesting that our ancestors were not primitive but profoundly ingenious, and that much of what they achieved has been forgotten, waiting for us to rediscover it. So prepare to travel with us through forgotten workshops, sunken shipwrecks, and overgrown ruins as we explore these enigmatic echoes of the past. By the time we're done, you won't just see history as names and dates on a page. You'll see it as a living, breathing mystery, filled with gaps that invite curiosity and wonder. You might even start looking at the world a little differently, questioning what else might be out there, buried just beneath the surface of what we think we know. This is more than a list. It's an invitation to see the past with new eyes and to imagine what could still be found. It's a humbling thought, really, that entire chapters of human ingenuity could simply fade from memory, leaving behind only fragments and whispers. When we look back at ancient civilizations, it's easy to assume our modern world represents the peak of innovation, but the truth is far more fascinating. Many of these societies developed technologies that were not just advanced for their era. They were masterpieces of sustainable design and efficiency, solutions that worked in harmony with their environment in ways we are still struggling to achieve today. The reasons for their disappearance are as complex as the technologies themselves. Often, this knowledge was guarded as a precious trade secret, known only to a select few guilds or families who took their formulas to the grave. In other cases, the innovations were so deeply woven into religious or cultural rituals that when those practices were suppressed or faded away, the technical understanding vanished with them. Then there are the more dramatic erasures, the libraries burned during invasions, the workshops buried under volcanic ash, the slow decay of materials, and the fragility of papyrus and parchment against the relentless march of centuries. Archaeologists and historians are like detectives at a crime scene that's thousands of years old, piecing together clues from a half-melted gear, the unusual composition of a metal alloy, or the mind-boggling precision of a stone wall that shouldn't be possible with the tools we've found nearby. They have to read between the lines of myths and legends, wondering if the story of a weapon that could burn on water might be more than just a tale, or if a crystal that finds the sun might have a basis in real optical science. This detective work reveals that progress isn't a straight, upward line. It's a winding path with dead ends, forgotten turns, and cycles of discovery and loss that can last for millennia. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it does more than just satisfy our curiosity about the past. It offers us profound lessons for our own future. In an age of climate change and resource scarcity, rediscovering a self-repairing concrete or a method for creating perpetually fertile soil isn't just academic, it could be revolutionary. These vanished technologies remind us that knowledge is fragile. It requires active preservation, widespread sharing, and a culture that values diverse forms of innovation. They challenge our arrogance, showing us that our ancestors were not primitive, but were brilliant problem solvers whose wisdom we have yet to fully reclaim. This context sets the stage for our journey as we begin to explore the first of these astonishing lost marvels. Now, let's turn our attention to the first and perhaps most famous of these vanished marvels, the Antikythera Mechanism. Imagine a sponge diver in the early 1900s, exploring a 2,000-year-old shipwreck off the coast of a tiny Greek island. His hand brushes against what he thinks is a piece of rock crusted over with centuries of undersea debris. But when archaeologists later carefully chip away at that lump, they don't find a statue or a simple pot. Instead, they reveal the most technologically complex object to survive from the ancient world, a bewildering clockwork assembly of precisely interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case covered in intricate, faded inscriptions. This was not a tool for war or a simple ornament. It was a machine for calculating the cosmos. We now know this device, named the Antikythera Mechanism after the island near where it was found, was a portable analog computer of breathtaking genius dating back to around 100 BC. It wasn't just a calendar or a simple clock. By turning a hand crank on its side, the user could set a date in the future, and through a symphony of at least 30 intermeshing gears, the mechanism would accurately predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and known planets. It could forecast solar and lunar eclipses, and it even included a small dial that counted down the 4-year cycle to the next Olympic Games. This wasn't just a scientific instrument. It was a physical model of the Greek understanding of the universe, a miniature orrery that brought the heavens down to human hands. The engineering sophistication is what truly staggers the modern mind. These gears weren't crude approximations. They were precision cut from bronze, with teeth shaped and spaced with a level of accuracy that wouldn't become common again until the Industrial Revolution over 1,800 years later. Some of the gears are so tiny and complex that they resemble the components inside a modern mechanical watch. This implies the existence of specialized tools for cutting metal, advanced mathematical knowledge for designing the gear ratios, and a workshop tradition that had been perfecting this craft for generations. This was not the work of a lone, brilliant tinkerer. It was the product of a highly advanced and likely well-funded scientific culture, one that had mastered both theoretical astronomy and practical mechanics to an astonishing degree. So what happened? How does a technology this revolutionary simply vanish from history for centuries? The answer likely lies in the turbulent end of the Hellenistic era. As the Roman Empire expanded, absorbing the Greek world, centers of learning were disrupted, and funding for pure scientific inquiry may have dried up. The craftsmen capable of building such devices were probably very few in number, and their knowledge was likely passed down through apprenticeships rather than written in manuals. When political instability, war, or economic collapse occurred, that fragile chain of knowledge was broken. The complex art of building these celestial calculators died with its last masters. The Antikythera mechanism we have is probably a rare, expensive luxury item, but it stands as proof that the foundational principles of mechanical computation were discovered not in the 1400s, but in the time of Archimedes. It forces us to wonder how many other devices like it were lost at sea, melted down for scrap, or simply crumbled to dust, taking with them secrets that would have accelerated human progress by millennia. But if the Antikythera Mechanism represents a lost pinnacle of delicate precision, the next technology on our list showcases a different kind of genius, one of raw, enduring strength. We shift from intricate bronze gears to massive, seemingly indestructible stone. Consider the sheer presence of the Pantheon in Rome, its vast, unsupported dome still the largest of its kind in the world after 2,000 years. Or picture the rugged aqueducts that stride across the European landscape, their arches defiant against centuries of weather and wear. These aren't just ruins, they are functioning monuments to a building material that seems to defy the laws of nature. Our modern concrete, by stark comparison, often shows signs of decay and spalling after just a few decades, requiring constant and costly repair. The Roman version, however, has not just endured, it has actually improved with age, especially when submerged in the one environment that destroys our own constructions, seawater. The secret to this supermaterial was a specific and almost alchemical recipe, a formula that was common knowledge for Roman engineers but became a forgotten mystery for centuries after the empire's fall. They didn't just mix sand and gravel. Their concrete was a sophisticated blend of lime, volcanic ash, particularly a type of ash from the town of Pozzuoli called pozzolana, and chunks of volcanic rock. The real magic, however, happened when this mix met seawater. Modern scientists, using advanced tools like electron microscopes, have recently decoded the process. When seawater seeped into the concrete, it triggered a long-lasting chemical reaction. The lime and ash would slowly recrystallize into a rare, incredibly robust mineral called aluminous tobamorite. This crystal essentially acts as a self-repairing agent, filling in micro cracks as they form and creating a structure that becomes more resilient over time, actually gaining strength from the constant lapping of the waves that would erode modern ports. The disappearance of this knowledge is a classic and tragic story of how a dark age can literally cause us to forget how to build. As the Roman Empire fragmented and its centralized power and trade networks collapsed, the specialized supply chains for these specific ingredients broke down. The knowledge of why certain volcanic ashes were superior became localized, then oral, and then simply faded away. Grand architectural projects became rare, and building techniques simplified for speed and defense rather than longevity. The meticulous, chemical-level understanding possessed by Roman engineers was replaced by rule-of-thumb approximations. It wasn't that people after the fall of Rome were less intelligent. It was that an entire library of practical, applied science had been burned, and the few surviving pages were scattered and incomplete. Today, this lost technology is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a beacon for sustainable innovation. The modern concrete industry is one of the largest single producers of carbon dioxide emissions on the planet, primarily from the production of cement. Roman concrete, however, required lower burning temperatures and used volcanic ash as a primary ingredient, drastically reducing its carbon footprint. Laboratories around the world are now racing to reverse engineer the full Roman recipe, not to rebuild aqueducts, but to create a new generation of durable, self-healing, and eco-friendly marine concrete for seawalls and foundations. The irony is profound. A 2,000-year-old technology might hold the key to building a more resilient future, a stunning reminder that progress sometimes means looking back to see what brilliant solutions we've left behind on the path. From the monumental and enduring strength of Roman concrete, we now turn to a technology of breathtaking artistry and lethal precision. A material that became the stuff of legend not for its scale, but for its sublime perfection in the hands of a warrior. Picture a blade, not merely a tool of war, but a masterpiece of metallurgy, its surface flowing with a mesmerizing, watery pattern that seems to capture light and shadow in its depths. This is Damascus steel, a name that evokes images of crusading knights encountering swords so superior that their own European blades shattered against them, leading to tales of near mythical sharpness and flexibility. These weren't just weapons, they were the pinnacle of an ancient scientific art, a technology so advanced that even with all our modern tools and knowledge, we still cannot perfectly replicate it today. The true origin of this miraculous metal lies not in Syria, but far to the east in the furnaces of ancient India. The foundational ingredient was a special type of high-carbon steel ingot known as woots. These ingots were themselves a marvel, produced in small clay furnaces where iron was melted with precise amounts of carbon-rich materials like wood or leaves, a process that required an intimate understanding of chemistry to achieve the perfect carbon content. These raw woots ingots were then traded along routes to Damascus, which became a famous center for the forging of the final, glorious product. The process that followed was where the true magic happened, a ritual of heat and hammer that transformed a lump of metal into a blade of unparalleled performance. The creation of a true Damascus steel blade was a symphony of controlled transformation. The blacksmith would take the woots ingot and seal it in a clay crucible, heating it in a charcoal forge until it reached a very specific, incandescent temperature, not so hot that it melted completely, but just hot enough to become malleable. It was then carefully hammered, folded, and reforged not dozens but potentially hundreds of times. This intricate dance of folding and forging did more than just strengthen the metal. It distributed the carbon particles in a way that created those iconic, swirling patterns. But the final, critical step was the cooling. The blade wasn't simply quenched in water. It was likely cooled at a very specific, slow rate, perhaps in the air or in another medium, which allowed the internal microstructure to form what are known as carbon nanotubes and nanowires within a matrix of exceptionally hard cementite. This nanoscale structure, only visible with electron microscopes millennia later, is what gave the steel its legendary properties, an edge that could slice a falling silk scarf in half, and a resilience that could parry a heavy blow without chipping or breaking. So how does such a phenomenally successful and sought-after technology simply vanish from the world? The demise of Damascus steel was a slow death by 1,000 cuts, a casualty of changing economics, politics, and technology. The first blow was the disruption of the trade routes that supplied the specific high-quality woots iron from India. As empires rose and fell, these supply chains fractured, cutting off the lifeblood of the artisan smiths. Then came the Industrial Revolution, which prioritized mass production over meticulous craftsmanship. Why spend weeks forging a single, perfect blade when you could produce hundreds of adequate ones in a factory? The guilds and families who held these secrets found their trade no longer sustainable, and as the old masters died, they took their nuanced knowledge, the exact feel of the heat, the specific rhythm of the hammer, the intuitive understanding of the cooling process with them to the grave. Modern scientists and master bladesmiths have spent decades trying to reverse engineer this ancient super steel. Using advanced spectroscopy, they've analyzed the molecular composition of antique blades. They've attempted to recreate the conditions with precision furnaces and documented techniques. And while they have produced beautiful pattern-welded steel that looks the part, and blades that are very, very good, none have ever matched the exact nanostructure and thus the unparalleled performance of the originals. The secret seems to lie in impurities. We now remove trace elements like vanadium, chromium, or even nanotubes formed from the specific organic materials in the original Indian ore, and a thermal recipe so precise it was more art than science. The loss of Damascus steel is a powerful testament to the fact that not all knowledge can be written down in a manual. Some of it exists only in the practiced hands and keen eyes of a master, and when that lineage is broken, it can be lost forever. This profound loss naturally pulls our curiosity toward other legendary materials, those that have crossed the blurry line between historical fact and outright myth. But the terrifying spectacle of Greek fire was only half the story. Its true power lay in the delivery system, a piece of military hardware that was centuries ahead of its time. The Byzantine navy employed a complex device known as a siphon, a pressurized brass tube mounted on the prows of their ships, often decorated with the head of a lion or other fearsome beast. Through the jaws of these metal monsters, the fire was projected not as a simple thrown pot, but as a continuous, roaring stream, much like a modern flamethrower. Some accounts describe a loud roaring or thundering noise that accompanied the blast, adding a psychological weapon to the physical one, as enemy crews saw a jet of unquenchable flame arcing across the water toward them. The operators of these devices, the siphonarioi, were among the most valued and protected specialists in the entire empire. They were the keepers of the flame in the most literal sense, trained not just in its operation but likely in the final, secret stages of its preparation. The entire system, from the mysterious chemical brew to the advanced pressurized delivery, was a state secret of the highest order, so valuable that emperors personally oversaw its confidentiality. Knowledge was deliberately compartmentalized. The men who gathered the raw INGREDIENTS Chinese letter never knew the final proportions or the exact process of combination, and the men who mixed it may not have understood the mechanics of the siphon. This obsessive secrecy is the primary reason why the formula vanished so completely. It wasn't just a trade secret lost to economic change. It was a weapon so potent that its recipe was considered as vital to the empire's survival as its armies or its treasury. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottomans in 1453, the final custodians of that knowledge, whoever they were lost to the chaos of the siege, and the secret died with them in the smoke and rubble of the last Roman capital. The loss of Greek fire is a stark lesson in the fragility of knowledge that is too tightly held. While its military application was devastating, one can't help but wonder if the chemical principles behind it, the ability to create a substance that could generate its own oxygen to burn on water, could have had transformative, peaceful applications. Could it have been adapted for mining, for welding, or as a source of controlled industrial energy? We'll never know, because the very secrecy that made it such a powerful weapon ultimately ensured its complete extinction from the world's technological library. This contemplation of a lost and powerful substance, however, leads us to a far more enigmatic and peaceful possibility: the potential for ancient civilizations to have harnessed a fundamental force of nature, not for destruction but for light and power. While the terrifying spectacle of Greek fire showcased a mastery of chemistry for destructive ends, our next discovery hints at a far more subtle and enigmatic understanding of the natural world, one that seems to flirt with the fundamental force of electricity. The story begins not on a battlefield, but in the basement of Iraq's National Museum in 1936, where German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig was cataloging a strange collection of artifacts unearthed from a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near Baghdad. Among the usual pottery and tools was a most peculiar object, a 5-inch-tall clay jar sealed with an asphalt plug. Stuck through that plug was an iron rod surrounded by a rolled copper cylinder. It looked for all the world like a primitive electrochemical cell. When Koenig proposed this radical idea, it was met with skepticism, but also with a thrilling sense of possibility. Could this humble jar, dating to roughly 200 BC, be the world's oldest known battery. The principle behind the so-called Baghdad Battery is elegantly simple, a fact that makes its potential existence so compelling. If the jar were filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or fermented grape juice, a chemical reaction would occur. The acidic liquid would react with the iron rod, causing it to corrode and release electrons. Those electrons would then flow through the electrolyte to the copper cylinder, creating a small electric potential difference or voltage between the two metals. By connecting the iron and copper with an external wire, a continuous, though very weak, electric current would flow. Modern replicas built to these exact specifications have consistently produced a small voltage, typically between 0.8 and 2 volts. It's not enough to power a light bulb, but it is a measurable, genuine electric current generated by a device that predates the official invention of the battery by Alessandro Volta in 1800 by more than 2 millennia. This leads to the tantalizing and hotly debated question: what on earth would an ancient Parthian or Sasanian artisan have used such a device for? The most popular and practical theory is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold or silver, onto the surface of a less valuable object, like a copper statue or a piece of jewelry. This was a known practice in the region. Artifacts from the same period show items plated with remarkably fine and consistent layers of gold, a result that is difficult to achieve with mercury-based gliding or simple mechanical application. A low, steady current from a bank of these batteries, connected together in a series to increase the voltage, could have provided the perfect, controlled method for this delicate work. It's a beautifully elegant solution, turning a chemical curiosity into a practical tool for commerce and art. However, not all scholars are convinced. Skeptics offer alternative explanations. Perhaps the jar was simply a secure storage container for sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper acting as protective, non-corrosive caps. Maybe it was used for a form of electrotherapy, applying a mild, tingling current to relieve pain, a practice known in other ancient cultures. The biggest point of contention is the complete lack of any ancillary evidence. No wires have been found with the jars, no examples of obviously electroplated objects from the same context, and no depictions in art or writing that clearly show such a device in use. The absence of these connecting clues is what keeps the Baghdad Battery firmly in the realm of fascinating speculation rather than settled fact. Whether it was a true battery or not, its very existence as a plausible electrochemical cell forces a profound shift in perspective. It demonstrates that the basic components for generating electricity, dissimilar metals and a common acidic solution, were readily available and could have been stumbled upon by observant ancient craftsmen through simple experimentation. The knowledge required wasn't advanced theoretical physics. It was empirical, hands-on chemistry. The fact that this technology, if that's what it was, never evolved or spread could be a classic case of a brilliant innovation that was simply too far ahead of its time. It may have been the secret of a single workshop, a specialized trick that never found a broader application beyond a specific, localized need. Without a theoretical framework to explain why it worked, and without a pressing, widespread demand for its function, the knowledge would have been incredibly fragile, easily lost when that workshop closed or that master artisan died without an apprentice. The haunting possibility of the Baghdad Battery is not that there was an ancient power grid lighting up cities, but that humanity might have been brushing against the edges of electrical understanding for centuries, only to repeatedly forget and have to rediscover it. It represents a road not taken, a branch of technology that withered before it could bear fruit. It asks us to consider how many other simple, profound principles were discovered, used for a single purpose, and then lost because the greater intellectual and cultural ecosystem wasn't ready to nurture them. This contemplation of a potential lost path in our scientific journey makes the next step in our exploration all the more astonishing, as we turn from a debated electrical device to an undeniable and breathtaking feat of engineering that required no metal at all. This seamless, mortar-less construction is perhaps the most brilliant feature of all, especially in a land violently shaken by frequent earthquakes. While modern buildings with rigid, mortared walls crack and crumble under seismic stress, Inca walls have a secret weapon: they dance. When an earthquake strikes, the stones in these precisely fitted walls shift and sway ever so slightly, absorbing and dissipating the enormous energy. Then, when the shaking stops, they simply settle back into their original positions. It's a breathtakingly elegant application of physics, an anti-seismic engineering solution achieved not with complex machinery, but with sheer geometric intelligence. These structures weren't just built to last, they were built to endure the very wrath of the earth itself, a testament to a profound and observant relationship with the natural world. The mystery deepens when we consider the how. The Incas had no iron or steel, no draft animals, and no wheel. Their hardest metal was bronze, too soft to cut andesite or granite. So how did they shape these colossal blocks with such impossible accuracy? The standard explanation involves stone or bronze hammers, abrasive sand, and immense patience. But many researchers find this unsatisfying, pointing to stones with interior angles and curves that seem to require more than simple percussion. This has led to more speculative yet fascinating theories. Some propose the use of plant-based chemicals that could temporarily soften the stone's surface, allowing it to be molded like clay, a method for which there is some ethnobotanical evidence in other cultures. Others wonder if they had mastered acoustic levitation or used specific sound frequencies to fracture rock along precise lines, a concept found in legends but with little physical proof. The most likely answer is that we have underestimated the power of generations of specialized knowledge, of master stonemasons who could read the grain of a rock and knew exactly where and how to strike it, using techniques refined over centuries and passed down through apprenticeships. This vast, intricate knowledge system, however, faced a threat it could not withstand: conquest. The arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century was catastrophic. Their primary goals were the extraction of wealth, specifically gold and silver, and the conversion of the population to Christianity. In this ruthless campaign, the indigenous social and knowledge structures were deliberately dismantled. The master stonemasons, likely members of a revered and specialized class, were killed, forced into labor in mines, or saw their traditions suppressed as pagan. The Spanish had no interest in learning how to fit stones together without mortar. They preferred to build in their own European style, using arches, lime mortar, and designs that were familiar to them. The intricate, hands-on knowledge of quarrying, shaping, and fitting these magnificent stones, a knowledge that existed not in books, but in the muscles, eyes, and tools of the craftsmen, died within a generation. The walls of Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu stand silent, their builders' techniques a secret they have kept for 500 years. The enduring lesson of Inca stonework is not just about lost methods of construction, but about a lost philosophy of building. They worked with their environment, not against it. They understood the properties of their materials intimately and designed structures that were in harmony with the powerful geologic forces of their homeland. In an age where we are grappling with the environmental cost of concrete and steel, their example of breathtaking durability and sustainability is more relevant than ever. It forces us to ask what other profound understandings of the material world we have lost in the relentless march of so-called progress. This incredible mastery over stone makes one wonder what other, less monumental but equally vital knowledge ancient cultures possessed, particularly the knowledge of how to feed vast populations against the odds, leading us to the secrets of the soil itself. Imagine navigating the vast, empty expanse of the North Atlantic with no landmarks under a sky perpetually gray and overcast. For the Vikings, this was not a hypothetical challenge but a regular part of their world, sailing from Scandinavia to Iceland, Greenland, and even the coast of North America centuries before Columbus. Without a magnetic compass, which had not yet reached Europe from China, their primary navigational tools were the sun and stars. But what did they do on the countless days when the sky was a featureless blanket of cloud or fog? According to their sagas, they had a secret weapon, a magical crystal called a solarstein or sunstone. This wasn't a tool of fantasy. It was a sophisticated piece of optical technology that harnessed a fundamental property of light itself, allowing them to see the unseen. The principle behind the sunstone is a phenomenon known as polarization. Sunlight, as it travels through the atmosphere, becomes polarized, meaning its light waves vibrate in a specific direction. This pattern of polarization forms a ring around the sun, invisible to our naked eyes but detectable with the right material. Certain transparent crystals like Iceland spar, a form of calcite, or cordierite have a unique property. When you look through them and rotate them slowly, they filter this polarized light, creating a visual effect where the crystal appears to change brightness or color depending on its alignment with the hidden sun. By holding such a crystal up to the sky and slowly turning it, a skilled navigator could find the point where the light passing through it appeared darkest or brightest. That alignment would reveal the exact position of the sun, even if it was completely obscured by cloud cover or just below the horizon. It was a way of using physics to create a celestial compass, providing a fixed reference point in a shifting, visually barren world. Recent experimental archaeology has moved this theory from the realm of saga and speculation into the domain of hard science. Researchers have taken crystals of Iceland spar aboard ships and into overcast conditions, successfully using them to pinpoint the sun's location with a remarkable degree of accuracy. One particularly compelling study even used computer modeling to show that using a sunstone to take just a few readings throughout a long day at sea could dramatically increase the chances of a Viking ship maintaining its correct course from Norway to Greenland. This wasn't just a lucky guess or a mythical concept. It was a repeatable, practical technique that could mean the difference between reaching a new settlement and vanishing forever into the icy ocean. The Vikings' understanding of this natural phenomenon represents a form of proto-science, a deep, empirical observation of the world that yielded incredibly effective results. So why did such a brilliant and reliable tool disappear from the navigator's toolkit? The answer is a classic story of technological displacement. The magnetic compass arrived in Europe around the 12th century, offering a new method for finding direction. Unlike the sunstone, which required a clear understanding of the sky and practiced skill to interpret the crystal's changing light, a compass was simple. It provided an easy-to-read, constant indication of north, regardless of the weather or the time of day. It was a technology that could be used effectively by almost anyone with minimal training. As trade routes expanded and sailing became more common among populations without the deep, culturally ingrained knowledge of the Vikings, the compass became the standard. The specialized art of using a sunstone, knowledge that was likely passed down orally from master navigators to their apprentices, simply faded away. It wasn't that the sunstone was inferior. In many conditions, it was likely more accurate, as it pointed to true north via the sun, not magnetic north. It was simply that the newer technology was easier to mass produce, easier to use, and didn't require a clear view of the sky. The old way, though brilliant, was abandoned for the convenience of the new. The loss of the Viking Sunstone is a subtle but powerful cautionary tale. It shows that progress doesn't always mean outright replacement of something worse with something better. Sometimes it means replacing something complex and masterful with something simpler and more accessible, with a slight trade-off in nuance and depth. It asks us to consider how many other empirically brilliant techniques have been lost because they were too specialized, too tied to a specific culture or oral tradition, and were swept aside by the tide of standardized technology. We are left to wonder what other secrets of observation and adaptation have vanished, not because they didn't work, but because they were never written down, and the last person who knew how to use them took that understanding with them. This reflection on a lost crystal that captured the sun naturally draws our curiosity toward another material that has captivated imaginations for millennia, one that was said to be mined not from the earth, but from a lost continent. From the practical brilliance of a navigation crystal, we now turn to a material that has captivated the human imagination for over 2 millennia, a substance that sits squarely at the intersection of archaeology, mythology, and metallurgy, orichalcum. The name itself sounds like something from a fantasy novel, and for the longest time, that's exactly where it resided. Our primary source is the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who, in his dialogues Critias and Timaeus, described it not as a myth but as a fact. In his account of the lost civilization of Atlantis, he wrote that orichalcum was a metal mined from the earth of the island continent, second only to gold in its value. He claimed the Atlanteans used it extensively, sheathing the interior walls of the Temple of Poseidon in its gleaming, fiery metal, and even minting it into currency. For centuries, scholars debated whether Plato was describing a real metal used by a real culture, or if he had simply invented a fabulous material to emphasize the wealth and splendor of his fictional Atlantis. The debate seemed destined to remain purely philosophical until a shipwreck gave us a tangible clue. In 2014, off the coast of the island of Sicily, marine archaeologists exploring a 2,600-year-old shipwreck made a stunning discovery. The vessel, which had sunk around 580 BC while carrying a cargo of precious goods from Greece or Asia Minor to the city of Gela in southern Sicily, held something extraordinary amidst its amphorae and pottery. Lying on the seabed were 39 ingots of a mysterious metal. Unlike the dull green of corroded copper or the familiar yellow of gold, these cast metal bars had a unique reddish gold hue. When analyzed, their composition was revealed. They were an alloy consisting primarily of copper, with a significant portion of zinc around 15 to 20%, along with smaller traces of nickel, lead, and iron. This composition is remarkably similar to what we know as brass, but with a specific formula that gave it a distinct color and properties. Here was a real, physical substance that matched the legendary description of orichalcum, a beautiful, brass-like alloy prized in antiquity for its resemblance to gold and its resistance to tarnishing. The existence of these ingots moves orichalcum from the realm of pure myth into the domain of historical technology. It wasn't a magical element from a lost world, but a sophisticated, human-made alloy. The skill required to produce it, however, was anything but simple. Creating a consistent brass alloy in the 6th century BCE was a metallurgical challenge of the highest order. Zinc ore is notoriously difficult to work with because zinc metal boils away and vaporizes at the temperatures needed to smelt it. The ancient metallurgists likely used a complex process called cementation. They would have taken crushed zinc ore, known as smithsonite, and mixed it with powdered charcoal and chunks of copper in a sealed crucible. When heated to a carefully controlled temperature in a furnace, the zinc vapor would be released from its ore and be absorbed by the copper, creating a uniform brass alloy. This was not a process for amateurs. It required a deep understanding of temperatures, airtight seals to prevent the zinc from escaping, and the use of very pure materials to avoid contamination. The masters of this craft were producing a high-status material for the elite, likely for use in decorative inlays, statuary, jewelry, and perhaps even as a form of bullion or special currency, exactly as Plato had described. So how does a technology this valuable and well-documented simply vanish? The answer is a tapestry of economic shifts and cultural collapse. First, the trade routes for the specific zinc ores needed may have been disrupted by wars or changing political alliances. If the supply of high-quality smithsonite dried up, production would have faltered. Second, and more importantly, the knowledge was likely held by a very small, specialized group of artisans. This kind of craft wisdom was often a closely guarded secret, passed from master to apprentice within a single family or guild. If that lineage was broken by war, plague, or a simple lack of a suitable heir, the nuanced, hands-on knowledge of temperatures, timings, and ore mixtures could be lost in a single generation. Furthermore, as the classical world evolved, the taste for such specific alloys may have waned in favor of purer gold and silver, making the complex production process no longer economically worthwhile. The technology didn't so much vanish as it was abandoned and then forgotten, its recipe fading into obscurity until it was remembered only as a legend from a sunken city. The story of Orichalcum is a powerful metaphor for the fragility of knowledge. It shows us that even a tangible, physical technology can dissolve into myth when the people who understand it are gone. It forces us to ask what other materials, common in their day, have been completely lost to us because their names changed or their recipes were never written down. Could the legendary Corinthian bronze, said to be an alloy mixed with precious metals that gave it a unique luster, be another such lost material? What about the gleaming, silver-like metals mentioned in various ancient texts? The rediscovery of Orichalcum ingots proves that sometimes the legends have a basis in fact, and that the line between history and myth is often thinner than we think. This reflection on a lost material that was both beautiful and functional seamlessly leads us to another ancient innovation, one that manipulated materials on an invisible scale to create a visual marvel that still baffles scientists today. Moving from the legendary gleam of Orichalcum, we encounter an object that seems to defy not just time, but the very laws of physics itself. Imagine a drinking vessel, a chalice of deep green glass, sitting innocuously on a nobleman's table in the 4th century. Then imagine that same cup being lifted to the light, and in a moment of pure alchemical magic, its color transforms before your eyes from a translucent jade green to a glowing, fiery ruby red. This is not a scene from a fantasy film. It is the reality of the Lycurgus Cup, a surviving Roman artifact that represents one of the most inexplicable and advanced technological feats of the ancient world. This single piece of glass is a stunning physical paradox, a masterpiece of art that secretly contains principles of modern nanotechnology that we only began to understand again in the last century. The secret to the cup's chameleon-like behavior lies in a phenomenon known as dichroism, the property of a material to display two different colors primarily by transmitted light and by reflected light. For the longest time, how the Romans achieved this was a complete mystery. It wasn't until the invention of the electron microscope in the 1950s that scientists could finally peer into the glass's structure and understand its magic. What they discovered was nothing short of breathtaking. The Roman glassmakers had, whether by incredible accident or by deliberate design, impregnated the glass with billions of minuscule particles of gold and silver. each one measuring only about 50 nanometers in diameter. That's roughly 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. At this nanoscale, metals behave differently than they do in bulk. These tiny particles, suspended in the glass matrix like stars in a galaxy, interact with light in a very specific way. When light shines on the cup from the front or in reflected light, these nanoparticles scatter the blue and green wavelengths of light, making the cup appear a shimmering, opaque green. But when a light source is placed inside the cup, or when light passes directly through it, the nanoparticles allow the longer red wavelengths to pass through, causing the entire vessel to glow with an ethereal, blood-red luminescence. The creation process behind this effect is where the true mystery deepens into the realm of the nearly impossible. To achieve this, the Roman artisans had to perform a series of incredibly precise and delicate operations without any of the tools we would consider essential today. First, they had to create a colloidal suspension of these precious metals. This would have involved grinding down gold and silver into a powder so fine it was essentially a dust of nanoparticles, a task of monumental difficulty without industrial mills. Then they had to mix this nanopowder into molten glass without it clumping together or being burned away, which requires exquisitely controlled temperatures and a perfect understanding of the chemical properties of the mixture. The prevailing theory is that they used a specific ritualized process. They may have combined gold and silver dust with a special glass frit and a precise amount of a mineral like manganese or antimony as a clarifying agent, then heated it all in a crucible at a very specific temperature for a very specific time. This process would have been less like following a recipe and more like a form of alchemy, guided by generations of accumulated, hands-on experience that understood the how even if they didn't understand the quantum mechanical why. This profound technological achievement was almost certainly a luxury art, the secret of a small, elite guild of glassmakers working for the highest echelons of Roman society. The Lycurgus Cup itself depicts a scene from mythology of King Lycurgus being ensnared by ambrosia, transformed into a vine, a narrative that literally plays out in the color transformation of the cup itself, suggesting it was for special ceremonial or display purposes. This very exclusivity is what doomed the technology. The knowledge was likely held by a handful of master artisans and passed down orally to a select few apprentices. When the Western Roman Empire began its slow collapse in the 5th century, the intricate web of trade, patronage, and stable workshop environments that supported such specialized, non-essential crafts unraveled. The masters of this nano-art likely found themselves without clients, their workshops destroyed or repurposed. The precise, tacit knowledge, the exact feel of the grind, the specific color of the molten glass at the perfect temperature, the intuitive timing died with them. It was a technology so far ahead of its time that the world simply wasn't ready to sustain it, and it vanished for over 1,500 years. The Lycurgus Cup stands as a silent, brilliant monument to a road not taken in scientific history. It forces us to completely re-evaluate the technological capabilities of the ancient world. If they could manipulate matter at the nanoscale for something as seemingly frivolous as a color-changing cup, what other microscopic innovations might they have stumbled upon? Could they have created other materials with unique properties that have been lost, perhaps antimicrobial surfaces using silver nanoparticles, or other optical devices that haven't survived? The cup is a haunting reminder that technological progress is not a single upward ladder, but a tree with many branches, some of which are pruned away by the harsh winters of history, leaving us to wonder what might have been. This incredible feat of turning metal and sand into light itself makes the next loss on our list all the more poignant, as we move from a technology that communicated through brilliant color to one that communicated through something far more subtle, the intricate language of knots. While the Lycurgus Cup dazzles with its nanoscale artistry, our next lost technology represents a different kind of brilliance, one that traded in light and color for the profound abstraction of information itself. High in the Andes, the Inca Empire managed one of the largest and most organized civilizations in the ancient world without ever developing a system of writing as we would recognize it. They governed a vast territory stretching thousands of miles with complex systems of taxation, census, and resource distribution that would challenge any modern administration. Their secret, a technology of memory and data that was both elegantly simple and bewilderingly complex, the Quipu. These were not mere ropes with knots, they were sophisticated three-dimensional records, a tangible, tactile language of administration and perhaps even history, crafted entirely from twisted cords and intricate patterns. A quipu, at its most basic, is an assembly of cotton or camelid wool cords suspended from a primary horizontal strand. But this simple description belies its incredible complexity. Each element of the quipu was a variable in a complex data code. The position of a cord on the main strand could denote its subject category, perhaps a specific village or type of good. The color of the cord was a crucial identifier. Different dyes made from plants, minerals, and insects could represent anything from social status to a particular commodity like corn, gold, or potatoes. The type of knot was the equivalent of a numerical digit. The Incas used a decimal positional system, where a figure 8 knot represented the number 1. A long knot could represent 2 through 9 depending on the number of turns, and a single knot represented a multiple of 10, 100, or 1,000 based on its placement on the cord. The order of the knots, their spacing, and even the direction of the twist in the rope itself, whether the fibers were spun clockwise or counterclockwise, may have held additional layers of meaning. A skilled interpreter, known as a quipukamayok, or keeper of the knots, could seemingly run their fingers along these cords and recite vast stores of information, from the number of llamas in a distant province to the historical narrative of a past emperor's reign. This is where the mystery deepens into one of the most tantalizing questions in archaeology. For a long time, scholars believed quipu were solely accounting devices, complex spreadsheets in cord form. But the sheer variety of their construction, with some featuring wildly different color combinations and knot structures that don't neatly align with numerical data, has led to a radical new theory. What if some quipu were not just numerical records, but narrative ones? What if they were a true, non-textual writing system, capable of recording laws, poetry, and history? The hypothesis is that the quipu may have operated on a binary or even trinary logic, similar in concept to modern computer code, where the combinations of knots, colors, and positions could create a syntax capable of conveying complex stories and ideas. This would make it a completely unique form of writing, one that communicated not through symbols inscribed on a flat surface, but through a multidimensional, physical language that you could feel in your hands. The tragic and infuriating reason we may never fully understand this system is due to one of history's most deliberate acts of cultural destruction. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they were evangelical Christians who saw the quipu not as a marvel of information science, but as a pagan artifact, a tool of idolatry and possibly even devil worship. The Spanish authorities, particularly under the influence of the Catholic clergy, launched a systematic campaign to find and destroy every quipu they could locate. They were burned in great pyres, their knowledge turned to ash. Even more devastatingly, the Spanish suppressed their use and punished those who practiced the old ways. The Quipu, the living librarians of this corded language, were disemboweled, persecuted, or killed. The chain of apprenticeship that passed this incredibly nuanced, tactile knowledge from one generation to the next was violently severed. Today, only about 600 Quipu survive in museums around the world, silent and unreadable, their stories locked away because the last people who knew how to read them were silenced centuries ago. The loss of the Quipu is more than just the loss of an ancient accounting tool. It is the loss of an entire way of thinking about and storing information. It forces us to confront the arrogance of defining, writing solely as marks on a page. The Quipu suggests that human intellect can find astonishingly diverse paths to the same goal, preserving memory and transmitting knowledge across time. Its destruction is a stark reminder that knowledge is not just stored in objects but in people, and that when those people are erased, a unique window into the human mind is closed forever. We are left to wonder what epic poems, what philosophical insights, what detailed histories of the Andes before the conquest were lost when those cords were cut. This contemplation of a lost language of knots makes the next possibility on our list seem all the more electrifying. The notion that ancient peoples might have understood and even harnessed a fundamental force of nature that we consider distinctly modern. While the Quipu represents a lost language of information, our journey now takes us into the realm of pure energy, to a hypothesis that challenges the very timeline of scientific discovery. Deep within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Egypt, there is a series of enigmatic stone reliefs that have sparked one of the most controversial and captivating debates in alternative archaeology. Carved into the walls are bizarre, large objects that, to a modern eye, look startlingly like oversized, elongated light bulbs. Inside these glass-like vessels, a snake-like form twists its way from a central pedestal, reminiscent of a glowing filament, while a cable-like cord connects the base of the device to a box that is held by a kneeling figure. To some, this is not a depiction of a mythical scene, but a literal illustration of ancient Egyptian technology, a functioning electric light bulb, powered by a primitive battery not unlike the one found in Baghdad. This interpretation suggests that the priests of Dendera might have illuminated their deep, windowless temple chambers not with flickering, smoky torches, but with the steady, ethereal glow of electric lamps. The so-called Dendera lightbulb theory hinges on a literal reading of these carvings, proposing that the Egyptians had stumbled upon the principles of a vacuum tube or Crookes tube, an early precursor to the modern light bulb. Proponents of this idea argue that the sophisticated artwork is too precise to be purely symbolic. They point to the absence of soot on the ceilings of many sealed tombs and temples, a practical problem that would have been solved by a smokeless form of illumination. The theory suggests that a device, perhaps using a version of the Baghdad Battery to provide a current, could have ionized gas within a glass vessel, causing it to glow with a faint light. This would have been a technology reserved for the most sacred of spaces, a divine secret known only to the highest priests and artisans, used to create awe-inspiring visual effects during rituals and to safely paint the intricate hieroglyphs deep inside burial chambers without filling them with dangerous fumes. Mainstream Egyptology and archaeology, however, offer a far different and widely accepted interpretation. They identify the central object in the relief not as a light bulb, but as a lotus flower, a profoundly important symbol in Egyptian mythology representing creation and rebirth. The snake is not a filament but the god Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun god emerging from the lotus. The entire scene is part of a well-documented cosmological narrative depicting the creation of the world from the primordial waters, with the cables and box being symbolic supports and the Jed pillar, a representation of stability. Egyptologists argue that applying a 20th century technological lens to a 2,000-year-old religious symbol is a classic case of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns like light bulbs in ambiguous stimuli. They maintain that the lack of soot can be explained by the use of refined oil lamps with clever reflectors, and that no physical evidence of such electrical devices, like wires or bulbs, has ever been found in any Egyptian excavation. This stark divide between the literal and symbolic interpretations perfectly encapsulates the challenge of studying speculative lost technologies. The Dendera reliefs exist in a frustrating gray area. They are not clear enough to be definitive proof, yet they are too intriguing to be completely dismissed. If there was a kernel of truth to the idea, if some priest-chemist had discovered that certain arrangements of metals and acids could produce a tingling sensation or a faint glow, this knowledge would have been wrapped in layers of religious ritual and symbolism. It would have been described not in terms of electrons and current, but as the breath of the gods or a divine spark. Such a phenomenon, never fully understood for what it was, would have been incredibly fragile. Without a theoretical framework to build upon, and without a practical application beyond temple spectacle, the knowledge would have remained a curiosity, a secret of a single temple cult that died out when that cult's influence waned or when the temple was finally closed. It would have faded first into obscurity, then into legend, and finally into a carving on a wall that we simply no longer know how to read correctly. The enduring fascination with the possibility of Egyptian electricity is less about proving a specific theory and more about what it represents. A deep-seated desire to find evidence that our ancestors were more technologically sophisticated than we give them credit for. It speaks to a recognition that human curiosity is a constant force, and that the basic building blocks of discovery, observation, experimentation, and accident have always been present. Even if the Dendera carvings are purely mythological, they force us to ask a valuable question. How many times in history has a fundamental principle like electromagnetism been briefly glimpsed, only to be explained away as magic or divinity and then forgotten? How many potential paths to scientific understanding were lost because the cultural context wasn't ready to nurture them? The ambiguity of the Egyptian battery is a powerful lesson in humility, reminding us that the absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence, and that some of history's greatest secrets might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to develop the right perspective to see them for what they are. While the debate over ancient electricity captivates the imagination, our next lost innovation leaves no room for doubt about its existence or its purpose, a machine that could feel the very pulse of the Earth itself. In the year 132 of the Common Era, in the magnificent court of the Han Dynasty, a brilliant scholar and inventor named Heng presented the emperor with a device that must have seemed like something from the realm of gods. It was a magnificent bronze urn nearly 6 feet tall, ornate with dragons and toads and intricate symbolism. But this was no mere ceremonial vase. Heng called it the Hufeng Didongyi, the instrument for querying the wind and the movement of the earth. To the modern world, it is known as the first seismoscope, a machine that could detect an earthquake so distant that the people in the capital city of Luoyang felt absolutely nothing at all. The genius of Heng's invention lay in its breathtakingly elegant simplicity. Inside the ornate urn, historical accounts suggest there was a carefully balanced inverted pendulum, a heavy mass suspended in the center. When a seismic wave from a distant earthquake rippled through the ground and reached the device, this internal pendulum would sway ever so slightly in the direction of the tremor's origin. This subtle motion was then amplified through a clever series of levers and mechanisms, which would trigger one of 8 dragon heads mounted around the outside of the urn. Each dragon held a bronze ball in its mouth, and when activated, it would release that ball, which would clatter down into the waiting mouth of one of 8 corresponding bronze toads sitting below. The specific toad that caught the ball pointed precisely in the compass direction from which the earthquake had come, allowing officials to dispatch aid and investigate the damage in that specific region, even if it was hundreds of miles away. The most stunning proof of its accuracy came from a historical record. The Book of the Later Han recounts that on one occasion, a dragon released its ball, though no tremors were felt in the capital. Skeptics dismissed it as a mechanical failure until several days later, a messenger arrived from a province far to the west, reporting that a major earthquake had indeed struck there on that exact day. The device had not only detected the quake but had correctly pointed toward its epicenter, validating its creator's claims and astonishing the court. It was a triumph of empirical observation and mechanical ingenuity, a machine that could sense what human senses could not, extending the reach of the imperial administration across the entire empire through a form of ancient early warning system. The heartbreaking mystery surrounding the seismoscope is that we don't know exactly how it worked. The original device was lost, likely during the chaotic wars and dynastic collapses that followed the end of the Han dynasty. The written descriptions that survived are frustratingly vague, focusing on its marvelous function rather than its precise internal mechanics. Was the pendulum inside a simple weighted mass, or was it something more complex? How did the lever system transfer such a tiny motion into a forceful release of the ball? For centuries, scientists and historians have proposed theories and built working replicas, some using pendulums, others using inertia and delicate release triggers. But without Zhang Heng's original plans, the exact design remains one of history's captivating puzzles, a testament to a mind that saw a solution to a problem no one else had even thought to solve. The loss of this technology is a classic tale of an innovation that was too far ahead of its time and too isolated to create a lasting scientific tradition. The seismoscope was a marvel, but it was a marvel in a vacuum. It emerged from Zhang Heng's unique genius but did not spark a wider Chinese or global revolution in seismology or predictive instrumentation. After the Han dynasty fell, the centralized state that funded such inventions fragmented. The knowledge, likely held by a small circle of court astronomers and engineers, was not widely disseminated or built upon. It became a legendary curiosity, a footnote in history books, rather than the foundational technology for a whole new science. It was only rediscovered and celebrated centuries later by modern historians looking back. This pattern makes us wonder how many other brilliant instruments, perhaps for predicting weather, measuring tides, or tracking stars, were invented in isolated pockets of the world, only to be forgotten because the network of knowledge necessary to sustain and develop them simply didn't exist yet. The lonely fate of the world's first earthquake detector perfectly sets the stage for another mysterious artifact that also used metal and artistry to map the heavens. Leaving behind the intricate mechanics of Zhang Heng's seismoscope, we venture now into a much older and more enigmatic realm of human discovery, one that maps not the shaking of the earth but the eternal dance of the heavens. Our story shifts to a cold winter's night in 1999, on a hilltop in the German state of Saxony-Anhalt. Two treasure hunters, using a metal detector illegally, unearthed something that would shatter our understanding of European prehistory. Alongside ancient swords and axes, they pulled from the frozen ground a bizarre, seemingly unremarkable bronze disc about the size of a large pizza, coated in a blue-green patina. They had no idea that this unassuming object, which they sold on the black market, was about to become one of the most important and controversial archaeological finds of the modern era. This is the Nebra Sky Disc, and it is the oldest known concrete depiction of the cosmos in the entire world, a stunning window into the mind of a people from over 3,600 years ago. What makes the disc so extraordinary is its breathtaking composition and the sophisticated knowledge it implies. The background of the disc is a deep blue-green, once made of a bronze that was deliberately treated with malachite to achieve this eternal night sky hue. Upon this canvas, ancient artisans hammered delicate appliques of gold. At first glance, the symbol seems simple: a crescent moon, a full sun, or perhaps a full moon, and a smattering of 32 stars, with one cluster of 7 that is almost certainly the Pleiades, a star group that has held profound significance for countless cultures across millennia. But the true genius of the disk is revealed by 2 golden arcs added later along the edges. These arcs precisely mark the angle between the solstice sunsets as viewed from the Mittelberg Hill where it was found, a clear indication that its creators were not just stargazers, but precise astronomical observers who understood the sun's changing path through the year. Finally, a third addition, a solar boat, a graceful, curved vessel, was placed at the bottom, a powerful mythological symbol representing the sun's journey across the sky and through the underworld each night. This layering of the disk's creation tells a story of evolving understanding. It wasn't made in a single moment, but was updated and modified over generations, becoming a physical palimpsest of astronomical knowledge. It functioned as a sophisticated hybrid tool, a portable cosmic calculator. By aligning the disk with the actual horizon, a Bronze Age priest or chieftain could have used it to determine the correct time for planting, for harvest, or for important religious ceremonies tied to the solstices. The presence of the Pleiades was a crucial marker. In many ancient calendars, their first appearance in the spring sky signaled the start of the new agricultural year, while their disappearance in the fall heralded winter. The disk unified the celestial with the terrestrial, the scientific with the spiritual, in a single, powerful object. It proves that over 1,000 years before the first Greek philosophers, a complex, unified understanding of the cosmos existed in the heart of Europe. The method of its creation is a lost art in itself. The precision of the gold inlays, hammered so perfectly onto the curved bronze surface without modern adhesives, speaks of master metalworkers with a deep, tacit knowledge of their materials. The chemical process to create the stable blue patina was a form of early alchemy. This was not the work of a primitive tribe, but of a sophisticated, stratified society with specialized craftsmen and astronomer priests who could fund and direct such a project. Yet, this knowledge and the culture that produced it vanished into the mists of the Bronze Age. The disk was ultimately buried as a sacred offering, perhaps during a period of immense social upheaval or invasion. And with its burial, the specific tradition of creating such cosmological instruments appears to have been lost. The technology wasn't necessarily forgotten outright, but the specific cultural and religious context that gave it meaning was swept away by the tides of migration, war, and changing beliefs. Later European cultures would develop their own ways of tracking the heavens, unaware that their ancestors had already crafted a perfect, portable model of the universe. The Nebra Sky Disc is a powerful reminder that a single, stumbled-upon artifact can completely rewrite history. Before its discovery, no one would have credited early Bronze Age Europeans with this level of astronomical sophistication. It forces us to confront a humbling truth. We have likely only found a tiny fraction of what these ancient cultures created. How many other similar discs or even more complex devices carved from wood or woven from fiber materials that would long since have decayed once existed? What other cosmological models, star charts, or calendars have been permanently lost, leaving us with an incomplete picture of our intellectual past? The disc is a survivor, a lone messenger from a world we are only beginning to understand. Its silent testimony begs us to look at every ancient artifact with fresh eyes, to consider that even the simplest object might hold a key to a lost world of thought. This profound shift from studying the cosmos to understanding the human body leads us to our next vanished technology, one that involved not bronze and gold, but flint and bone, and a courage that is almost unimaginable to contemplate. From the celestial mysteries of the Nebra Sky Disc, we now turn our focus inward to the most intimate and daring frontier of ancient innovation, the human body itself. It is a concept that can make a modern person flinch the deliberate act of drilling, scraping, or cutting a hole into the living human skull. This practice, known as trepanation, is one of the oldest and most widespread surgical procedures in human history, with archaeological evidence dating back an astonishing 7,000 years to Neolithic times. Found on every continent except Antarctica, from pre-Columbian Peru to ancient France, from the islands of the Pacific to the heart of Africa, trepanation represents a universal, bold leap into the unknown realms of medicine and the mind. This was not the crude butchery of popular imagination. It was a sophisticated, life-saving technology born of careful observation, immense courage, and a profound understanding of human anatomy that we are only beginning to fully appreciate. The reasons for performing such a drastic procedure were as varied as the cultures that practiced it. The most straightforward and common reason was likely traumatic head injury. Skulls from archaeological sites frequently show evidence of trepanation performed next to or over a fracture, where a blow from a club or a fall had shattered the bone and created pressure on the brain. Ancient surgeons understood that relieving this pressure could save a life, but their understanding went far beyond the physical. Many cultures believed that severe headaches, epilepsy, mental illness, or even persistent spiritual malaise were caused by evil spirits or bad winds trapped inside the skull. By creating an opening, a ritualized portal, the healer could provide these malignant forces with an escape route, freeing the patient from their torment. In this sense, trepanation was a perfect fusion of the practical and the spiritual, a physical surgery performed for deeply metaphysical reasons, treating the unseen ailments of the soul with the very tangible tools of flint, obsidian, and bronze. What is truly staggering, and what separates this from mere superstition, is the overwhelming evidence that it worked. Modern analysis of trepanated skulls, using advanced imaging and forensic techniques, reveals an incredible fact. A majority of patients survived the operation and went on to live for years, even decades afterward. We know this because the bone around the edges of the hole shows clear signs of healing and regrowth. These survival rates, estimated to be as high as 80% in some populations, are a testament to a level of skill that seems almost impossible without modern antiseptics, anesthesia, or imaging. The surgeons knew exactly where and how to cut to avoid the major blood vessels lining the brain, like the middle meningeal artery, a mistake that would have led to rapid, fatal bleeding. They used tools with astonishing precision, often starting with a cross-hatched pattern of shallow cuts before carefully lifting out a small square of bone, a technique that was far less traumatic than drilling a full circle. They understood the critical importance of aftercare, likely applying poultices made from known antibacterial and antifungal plants like honey, turmeric, or certain molds to prevent infection in the open wound. And this is where the mystery deepens into a profound loss. We can see the results of their skill in the healed bone, but the intimate details of how they achieved it are almost entirely lost to us. The specific herbal concoctions they used to cleanse the wound and prevent infection, their ancient equivalent of antibiotics, are unknown. The methods they used to manage the unimaginable pain of the procedure are a complete enigma. Did they use alcohol or fermented beverages? Were they aware of the psychoactive and numbing properties of certain plants, like coca leaves in South America or opium poppies in Europe? Was the operation itself conducted within a powerful ritualistic trance, where the patient's psychological state was manipulated to alter their perception of pain? This knowledge was not written in textbooks. It was passed down through generations of master healers to their apprentices, a sacred, hands-on tradition of anatomy, botany, and psychology. The healer knew the feel of the bone, the look of healthy tissue, the recipes for salves, and the chance to calm the patient, a holistic package of knowledge that died when that lineage was broken. The decline of trepanation wasn't due to it being ineffective. It was a victim of the very evolution of medical science. As formal, text-based medical systems developed in places like ancient Greece and China, theory began to supplant empirical practice. The humoral theory of Galen, which dominated European medicine for over 1,000 years, explained disease as an imbalance of bodily fluids, not spirits trapped in the head. This new theoretical framework made the physical act of drilling a hole seem primitive and unnecessary. Furthermore, as societies became more centralized and urbanized, the role of the local village healer, the keeper of this old empirical knowledge, was often supplanted by the academically trained physician who prioritized bloodletting and purges over surgery. The old ways were dismissed as superstition, and the intricate, hard-won knowledge of pain management, infection control, and surgical technique that made trepanation viable was simply forgotten, relegated to the realm of backwater folk magic. We replaced a difficult, dangerous, but often effective practice with theoretical systems that were, for centuries, often far more lethal. The story of trepanation is a powerful lesson in the different paths of knowledge. It shows that effectiveness is not always enough to preserve a technology. It can be swept aside by changing paradigms, even if the new paradigm is initially less successful. It forces us to wonder what other profound medical innovations were lost in this same way. What were the herbal antiseptics that worked so well? What were the pain management techniques that allowed patients to endure such procedures? The loss is a haunting one, because within that forgotten knowledge could lie insights that are still relevant today, particularly in the field of craniofacial surgery or even in our search for new, natural antibiotics. This reflection on the fragility of medical wisdom naturally shifts our perspective from healing the human body to a technology that focused on healing the land itself, on coaxing life from the most unlikely of places. This incredible mastery over stone and the human body makes one wonder what other, less monumental but equally vital knowledge ancient cultures possessed, particularly the knowledge of how to feed vast populations against the odds, leading us to the secrets of the soil itself. The Amazon rainforest is often portrayed as the ultimate example of a pristine, untouched wilderness, a fragile ecosystem where the soil is naturally poor, nutrient-starved, and incapable of supporting large-scale agriculture. This narrative has been used to argue that the Amazon could never have sustained complex, sedentary civilizations, but this story is fundamentally wrong. Scattered throughout the basin, often near riverbanks, are mysterious islands of profound fertility, patches of deep, rich, black earth that stand in stark contrast to the surrounding thin, yellow, acidic clay. This is Terra Preta do Indio, or Amazonian dark earth, and it is not a natural phenomenon. It is one of the most significant and deliberate environmental transformations ever achieved by an ancient society, a lost technology of soil creation that could hold a key to our planet's future. The secret to Terra Preta's power is a specific and sophisticated recipe, a form of biochar-based agriculture that modern science is only now beginning to fully appreciate. Indigenous peoples didn't just farm the land, they literally built it from the ground up. The soil is a complex matrix of charcoal, or biochar, created through a process of low-temperature smoldering called pyrolysis, which turns organic matter into a stable, porous carbon structure. Mixed in are finely crushed pottery shards, animal bones, composted organic waste like manure and plant matter, and shells. This wasn't casual refuse disposal. It was a deliberate, managed process of soil enrichment. Each component played a vital role. The biochar is the engine of the system. Its incredibly high surface area and porous structure act like a microscopic coral reef, providing a perfect habitat for beneficial soil microbes and fungi. It also acts as a nutrient sponge, locking in fertilizers like phosphorus, calcium, and nitrogen that would otherwise be quickly washed away by the torrential tropical rains, and then slowly releasing them to plant roots over decades, even centuries. The pottery shards further improved drainage and aeration in what would otherwise be a dense clay, creating an optimal root environment. The results of this ancient recipe are nothing short of miraculous. While surrounding soils are depleted after just a few growing seasons, Terra Preta patches remain phenomenally fertile for hundreds, even thousands of years. They are self-renewing, with the microbial life within them continuously cycling nutrients and maintaining the soil's health. This technology allowed pre-Columbian societies to support large, dense populations in the Amazon, completely overturning the old idea of a virgin wilderness. They created sprawling networks of towns and villages connected by roads, sustained by this managed, hyper-productive landscape. They weren't just living in the Amazon, they had learned how to garden it on a grand scale, creating a sustainable, perennial agriculture that worked in harmony with the rainforest rather than destroying it. The tragic loss of this knowledge is a direct consequence of the cataclysm that followed European contact. The diseases brought by explorers and conquistadors, such as smallpox and measles, swept through the Americas with a virulence that is hard to overstate. It's estimated that up to 90% of the indigenous population perished within the first century of contact, a demographic collapse so severe that it likely cooled the global climate as forests regrew on abandoned farmland. This apocalypse wasn't just a loss of life, it was a loss of worldviews, of languages, of entire cultures, and with them the intricate, place-based knowledge that had been refined over millennia. The masters of Terra Preta creation, the individuals who knew the precise recipes, the right types of biomass to char, the correct temperatures for pyrolysis, and the ideal ratios of charcoal to pottery to waste, were wiped out. Their sustainable cities were swallowed by the jungle, and their greatest invention was left behind as a silent, fertile testament to their genius, its instructions forever erased. Today, the rediscovery of Terra Preta is causing a revolution in our understanding of both the past and the future. Archaeologists now see the Amazon not as a pristine wilderness but as a vast, managed garden, its biodiversity shaped by human hands. For modern agronomists and climate scientists, Terra Preta is a beacon of hope. The process of creating biochar is a form of carbon sequestration. It takes carbon from the atmosphere and locks it into a stable form in the soil for centuries, making it a powerful tool in the fight against climate change. Modern attempts to recreate Terra Preta, often called biochar technology, seek to mimic this ancient practice to improve soil fertility, reduce dependence on chemical fertilizers, and draw down carbon dioxide. The profound irony is that a technology developed thousands of years ago to sustain life in a challenging environment might now be crucial to sustaining life on a planetary scale. Its disappearance is a sobering lesson in the fragility of knowledge, but its rediscovery is a testament to the enduring power of ancient wisdom. proving that the most advanced solutions are sometimes those that have been quietly waiting beneath our feet all along. From the life-giving alchemy of Amazonian dark earth, we now turn to a technology designed not to nurture life, but to defy the very elements, creating islands of warmth and comfort in a pre-industrial world. Imagine it is a bitterly cold winter in Roman Britain or Germania. Outside, the wind howls and a blanket of snow covers the land. But inside the villa of a wealthy Roman official, the scene is one of surreal luxury. The family strolls across mosaic floors in bare feet, feeling not a chill but a gentle, radiating warmth. The walls themselves are pleasantly hot to the touch, and in the bathhouse, the caldarium steam room is filled with a dense, humid heat that loosens muscles and soothes the soul. This wasn't magic, it was engineering. This was the Hypocaust, the world's first central heating system, a masterpiece of comfort technology that wouldn't be matched in sophistication for over 1,000 years after the empire's fall. The principle behind a Hypocaust was brilliantly simple, yet its execution required meticulous planning and construction. The system functioned like a giant whole-house radiator. At the heart of it all was a furnace or prefurnium, typically stoked by slaves with a constant supply of wood or charcoal. This furnace was strategically located below the living space, often outside the main walls of the building to contain the smoke and risk of fire. But the heat from this fire didn't just vanish up a chimney. Instead, it was channeled. The entire floor of the building was raised off the ground by a grid of short, sturdy pillars made of stacked bricks or stone. This created a hollow space, a plenum chamber beneath the floor. The hot air and gases from the furnace would rush into this space, slowly circulating and heating the solid floor slabs above from below. But the Romans didn't stop there. They ingeniously embedded rectangular hollow tubes called tubuli within the walls themselves. These terracotta pipes acted as flues, allowing the hot air to rise through the walls before eventually escaping out of terracotta chimneys in the roof. This dual-action system transformed the entire structure, both floor and walls, into a single, massive heat exchanger, ensuring a remarkably even and comfortable temperature throughout the room. The true genius of the Hypocaust, however, lay in its careful management of risk and materials. The Romans possessed a deep, practical understanding of thermodynamics and material science. They knew that different types of stone and mortar had different thermal properties and expansion rates. The floors were not made of just any material, they were typically layered. A base layer of concrete was topped with a leveling bed of mortar, upon which the famous tesserae tiles for mosaics were set. This entire sandwich was designed to absorb and slowly release the heat without cracking under the stress. The walls lined with tubuli were often finished with marble slabs, which conducted the warmth beautifully. The system required constant attention. A hypocaust furnace had to be stoked for hours to bring a large bath complex up to temperature, but the result was a level of domestic and public comfort that was simply unimaginable to most of the medieval world that would follow. It was a technology that turned buildings into living, breathing organisms, warmed from the very bones of their structure. The disappearance of this widespread comfort was one of the most tangible signs of the fall of Rome and the onset of what we often call the Dark Ages. The Hypocaust was a quintessential infrastructure technology. It was complex, expensive to build, and required a stable, wealthy society to maintain it. It depended on specialized architects who understood airflow and heating principles, skilled masons who could construct the delicate pillars and flues, and a constant labor force to feed the voracious furnaces. As the Roman Empire fragmented, the economy collapsed, long-distance trade networks broke down, and the centralized authority that funded grand public works like the immense bath complexes vanished. The knowledge of how to build new hypocausts didn't vanish overnight, but the societal need for them did. In a poorer, more dangerous, and decentralized world, the priority shifted from comfort to sheer survival. Heating became a localized affair, a simple hearth in the center of a room, its smoke curling up to a hole in the roof. It was inefficient, smoky, and dangerous, but it was cheap and easy. The exquisite comfort of radiant floor heating became a forgotten luxury, a ghost of a warmer, more advanced past remembered only in the crumbling walls of abandoned villas. The story of the Hypocaust is a powerful lesson in how even the most brilliant technologies are dependent on their societal context. It wasn't that people in the 5th century suddenly forgot how to stack bricks to make pillars. They lost the complex system of knowledge, wealth, and organization that made such a technology desirable and possible. The principles, however, were never entirely lost. The concept of underfloor heating and heating through walls influenced later systems, like the Korean ondol or even certain medieval monastery heating designs. But the full, integrated Roman system, applied on a massive civic scale, was a glory that wouldn't return until the modern era. It forces us to consider what other comforts and conveniences the ancients enjoyed that we might scarcely credit. Perhaps advanced ventilation, sophisticated plumbing, or acoustic design, all lost because the complex society that supported them first had to crumble. This contemplation of a lost world of ease makes the pivot to our next topic all the more striking, as we move from a technology that preserved life and comfort to one of the most legendary and controversial weapons ever conceived, a device that supposedly harnessed the power of the sun itself. Leaving behind the warm embrace of Roman central heating, we now step onto the sun-baked battlements of ancient Syracuse, where one of the most audacious and debated military legends was born. The year is 212 BCE, and the Roman Republic, under the command of the general Marcus Claudius Marcellus, has laid siege to the powerful Greek city-state in Sicily. The great inventor and mathematician Archimedes is a resident of the city, and according to accounts written centuries later by authors like Lucian and Anthemius, he devised a weapon so ingenious it seemed to harness the power of the sun itself. As the sleek Roman warships, their sails billowing and oars churning the water, advanced on the city's defenses, the story goes that Archimedes directed a battery of highly polished bronze shields or mirrors. These were not for deflecting arrows, but for focusing the intense Mediterranean sunlight into a single, searing point of heat on the wooden hulls of the invading fleet. To the terrified Roman sailors, it must have seemed like the work of a wrathful god, a beam of pure, concentrated fire leaping from the city walls to set their ships ablaze from a distance, without a single arrow or pot of flaming pitch being launched. The sheer brilliance of this concept lies in its elegant application of fundamental physics. Archimedes, a genius who had already calculated pi and formulated the principles of leverage and buoyancy, would have understood the properties of light and reflection. The weapon, often called the heat ray or death ray, would have operated on the principle of the parabolic reflector. A flat mirror simply bounces light away at an angle, but a curved, parabolic mirror can focus all the incoming parallel rays of sunlight to a single, tiny focal point, generating temperatures high enough to char wood and ignite tar-covered hulls. The engineering challenge, however, is what makes historians deeply skeptical. To be effective against a moving ship hundreds of feet away, the mirrors would have needed to be large, perfectly shaped, and made of highly reflective polished bronze, not the crude copper or iron of typical shields. Even more daunting is the coordination required. The story suggests that many mirrors were used in concert, which implies a system of commands and precise adjustments to keep the focal point steady on a single target as the ship rocked on the waves and the sun moved across the sky. It would have required the timing of a military drill team and the optical precision of a modern telescope, a feat that seems almost impossible for the technology of the time. This is precisely why the legend has been the subject of fierce debate and modern experimentation for centuries. The most famous test was conducted by the Mythbusters at MIT in 2005. They assembled a team of students with 127 square feet of mirrored surface and attempted to set a stationary, tar-coated wooden mock-up of a Roman ship on fire. Their initial attempts failed, leading them to initially declare the myth busted. However, in a later episode, using a more optimized setup and focusing on the flammability of the ship's sail rather than its hull, they managed to create a significant flame and declared it plausible. Other experiments have had similarly mixed results. A group in San Francisco successfully ignited a small boat in 1973, but critics argued their modern mirrors were far superior to anything the Greeks could have crafted. The fundamental issue remains that while the basic principle is sound, the practical challenges of crafting the mirrors, coordinating the operators, and maintaining a steady focus on a moving target under battle conditions are immense. It may have been a terrifying psychological weapon, creating glints of light and patches of smoke that panicked the Romans into believing they were being attacked by divine fire, even if it never actually sunk a fleet. The ultimate fate of this knowledge, like so many of Archimedes' works, is a tragedy woven into the story of his death. When the Romans finally broke through the defenses of Syracuse, the great scholar was so engrossed in a mathematical diagram drawn in the sand that he allegedly told a Roman soldier to avoid disturbing his circles. The soldier, enraged, killed him on the spot. With him died not only the man but the entirety of his unrecorded, tacit knowledge. The heat ray, if it ever existed in a functional form, was never documented in any of his surviving texts. It lived on only as a campfire story told by surviving Roman soldiers, a tale that grew more fantastic with each retelling until it passed into the realm of legend. Its disappearance is a perfect symbol of how the line between historical technology and myth becomes blurred by time. Without a blueprint or a physical artifact, we are left with a compelling story that tests the boundaries of what we believe was possible. This legendary device forces us to ask a broader, more haunting question. If a story this spectacular could emerge from the siege, how many other less dramatic but equally ingenious defensive technologies have been completely lost to history? Perhaps there were complex counter-siege engines, non-lethal area denial systems using noxious chemicals, or acoustic devices designed to disorient attackers, inventions that were so effective in their specific context that they were never needed again, and thus never recorded. The story of Archimedes' heat ray is less about the reality of burning ships and more about the boundless potential of the human mind when faced with existential threat. It represents the spark of inventive genius that, in this case, flickered out almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only a brilliant, unverifiable story and a challenge to our assumptions about ancient capabilities. This contemplation of a lost defensive art, one based on precise calculation and coordination, leads us naturally to consider another fundamental system that required immense precision, a lost standard of measurement that may have unified the ancient world. From the legendary heat ray of Archimedes, a weapon of focused light and brilliant coordination, we now turn to a far more subtle but equally profound mystery, one not of destruction, but of creation and cosmic order. Imagine standing in the center of Stonehenge at dawn on the summer solstice, watching the sun rise perfectly over the heel stone, The alignment is breathtaking, but it prompts a deeper question. How did the builders, thousands of years ago and hundreds of miles apart, achieve such consistent precision in their monumental circles? The answer may lie not in a tool we can hold, but in a concept, a standardized unit of measurement that seems to have been shared across prehistoric Europe. This is the story of the Megalithic Yard, a hypothetical measure that, if real, suggests a lost scientific culture of astonishing sophistication. The man who first proposed this idea was not a mystic, but a rigorously scientific mind. Alexander Thom was an Oxford University professor of engineering who spent decades, from the 1930s to the 1970s, personally surveying over 600 Neolithic stone circles and alignments across Britain and France. He didn't just take rough measurements, he used theodolites and precise trigonometry to map the layouts of sites like Callanish in Scotland and Qanat in France with an engineer's exacting eye. After analyzing this mountain of data, he noticed something that seemed impossible. The diameters of the circles and the spacings between the stones weren't random. They appeared to be multiples of a single standard unit of length. He calculated this unit to be approximately 2.722 feet, or 0.829 meters, and he named it the Megalithic Yard. The implications of this discovery are staggering. If Thom was correct, it means that a standardized unit of measurement was in use across a vast geographical area, from the Scottish Islands to the coast of Brittany, and across a span of centuries. This wasn't a local builder's rule of thumb, it was a continent-wide system. Furthermore, the construction of these sites required more than just a standard measure. Thom also identified a precise megalithic rod, equal to 2.5 megalithic yards, and a megalithic inch, which allowed for remarkably fine adjustments. This points to a society with a sophisticated understanding of geometry, capable of creating perfect circles, ellipses, and even complex egg-shaped formations using nothing more than peg and rope geometry, but executed with a mathematician's precision. The builders were not rough-hewn primitives, they were master surveyors and astronomers, encoding their understanding of the heavens into the very geometry of the earth. The greatest mystery, however, is how this standard was maintained and transmitted. How did a culture with no known written language, no centralized empire, and no easy means of long-distance communication manage to disseminate and preserve a unit of length with such consistency across thousands of years and miles? Thom himself speculated that the builders may have created a physical standard, perhaps a pendulum that beat at a specific frequency, or a fixed length based on astronomical observations. The megalithic yard has even been linked to the polar circumference of the Earth, suggesting its derivation from a fraction of the planet's size, a concept we wouldn't expect for another 4,000 years. This hints at a shared sacred knowledge, possibly carried by a class of elite astronomer priests who traveled between communities, overseeing construction and ensuring the sacred measurements were preserved with ritual accuracy. The monuments themselves were not just calendars or temples, they were the textbooks and the standards bureau of their age, stone repositories of a complex scientific tradition. Yet, like so many technologies of the mind, this system vanished. With the arrival of the Bronze Age and then the Iron Age, new peoples, new languages, and new technologies swept across Europe. The focus shifted from massive communal stone projects to metalworking, fortified settlements, and different religious expressions. The knowledge of the megalithic yard, so crucial to the worldview of the megalith builders, was simply no longer relevant to the new societies that emerged. It faded from memory, leaving behind only the silent, majestic circles that stood as a cryptic testament to its existence. The loss of this standardized measure represents more than just the forgetting of a number. It signifies the disappearance of an entire intellectual framework, a unified way of seeing and measuring the world that connected diverse communities through a common language of stone and sky. It forces us to wonder what other systems of order and measurement have been completely erased from history, leaving no physical trace beyond the tantalizing patterns they created. This contemplation of a lost science of measurement seamlessly draws our curiosity from the grand scale of monuments to the microscopic world of ancient chemistry and the secrets of a legendary universal remedy. Moving from the grand, silent language of the megalithic yard, we now delve into a far more intimate and perilous realm of lost knowledge, the ancient quest to make the human body itself invulnerable. This is the story of Mithridatum, perhaps the most famous lost recipe in the history of medicine, a legendary universal antidote that promised to defy one of the oldest weapons of power and treachery, poison. Its creator was a king so paranoid about assassination that his name became synonymous with the practice of self-protection through incremental exposure. Mithridates VI of Pontus, a ruler who lived in constant fear of the very fate he would eventually meet. The saga of Mithridates is like something from a gripping political thriller. Ascending to the throne of a Hellenistic kingdom in what is now Turkey around 120 BC, he spent much of his long reign at war with the expanding Roman Republic. His court was a hotbed of intrigue, and his life was constantly under threat from rivals, both foreign and domestic. This perpetual state of danger forged in him an obsession with toxicology. Legend says he dedicated himself to the study of poisons and their counteragents, testing potential antidotes on criminals and even on himself. He sought the ultimate pharmacological shield, a compound that would render him immune to any venom or poison an assassin might use. Through years of meticulous and undoubtedly brutal experimentation, he is said to have perfected his formula, Mithridatum. This was no simple herbal tonic. By all accounts from later Roman writers like Pliny the Elder, it was a breathtakingly complex concoction, a polypharmaceutical marvel containing dozens of ingredients. The base was a paste of dried walnuts, figs, and rue, but into this were mixed tiny, precise amounts of far more potent substances. The recipe allegedly included opioids like opium for pain relief and sedation, anti-venens derived from the very snakes whose venom it was meant to counteract, and a bewildering array of herbs, spices, and resins, each chosen for its perceived protective or purgative properties. Cinnamon, saffron, ginger, and castoreum from beavers were all thought to be part of the mix. The genius of Mithridates' approach, in principle, was the concept of building tolerance through minuscule, gradually increased doses, a practice we now call Mithridatism. The idea was to precondition his body to handle toxins, so that when a lethal dose was finally administered, his system would already be fortified. When the Romans finally defeated Mithridates, they seized his private papers, and the recipe for his famed antidote was brought to Rome as a supreme prize of war. It became the most sought-after pharmaceutical secret in the ancient world. Emperor Nero's physician, Andromachus, later tinkered with the formula, adding viper's flesh and more opium and renaming it theriac. This enhanced version became a staple of imperial pharmacies for centuries, a revered, if not fully understood, panacea. Its use persisted through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, where it was manufactured in elaborate public ceremonies in cities like Venice and exported across Europe as a cure-all for everything from the plague to melancholy. For over 1,000 years, it stood as a testament to a very early, very sophisticated understanding of pharmacology and the concept of preventative medicine. And yet, the original true formula is lost to us. The knowledge was fragmented and diluted over centuries. Each physician, each apothecary, added their own interpretations and substitutions based on local ingredients and prevailing medical theories. The precise original proportions, the specific types of herbs, the exact preparation method, the very details that made it potentially effective, were slowly altered beyond recognition through generations of copying and guesswork. Its final disappearance was a quiet one, as the scientific revolution took hold in the 17th and 18th centuries. Medicine began to demand empirical evidence and standardized formulas. Theriac, with its mythical reputation and wildly variable recipes, was increasingly seen as a superstitious relic of a pre-scientific age. It was dismissed as mere quackery and faded from the official pharmacopoeias, its original power lost beneath layers of myth and poorly understood tradition. The tragedy of Mithridatum's loss is a profound lesson in the fragility of medical knowledge. It wasn't lost in a single fire or invasion, but through the slow erosion of nuance. It shows how easily a complex, evidence-based practice can devolve into superstition when the underlying rationale is forgotten. We are left to wonder what active principles within that vast recipe were genuinely effective. Did it contain natural blood thinners or anticonvulsants that could mitigate the effects of certain venoms? Could the practice of Mithridatism actually have worked for specific toxins? The loss forces us to consider how many other ancient remedies, developed through generations of careful, observational trial and error, might have held secrets that our modern, isolated compound approach to medicine has yet to rediscover. This contemplation of a lost art of sustaining human life leads us directly to our next marvel, a technology designed to sustain entire civilizations by mastering the most fundamental resource of all, water. While the lost art of Mithridatum was focused on protecting the individual human body from internal threats, our next technology represents a monumental effort to protect and nurture entire civilizations from an external one, the relentless scarcity of water. Imagine the searing, arid landscapes of ancient Persia, where the sun dominates the sky and surface water is a fleeting, precious mirage. In this environment, survival itself depended on accessing one vital resource hidden deep beneath the burning sands, groundwater. But how do you bring that water to the surface and transport it across vast distances to farms and cities without it evaporating under the brutal sun? The answer, developed over 3,000 years ago, was not to fight the elements but to work with them in an act of profound subterranean engineering. This was the Qanat, a gravity-fed underground aqueduct that represents one of the most sustainable and ingenious water management systems ever conceived by human hands. The construction of a Qanat was a monumental community effort, a project that required generations of specialized knowledge and backbreaking labor. It began with the discovery of an aquifer at the foot of a mountain, where water from rainfall or snowmelt naturally percolated into the earth. From this mother well, skilled surveyors, known as muqannis, would use nothing more than their knowledge of geology and simple tools like plumb bobs and water levels to chart a perfectly gentle downward slope, often just a fraction of a degree, away from the foothills and towards the arid plains where the water was needed. Teams of diggers would then begin the dangerous work of excavating a series of vertical shafts down to the depth of the planned tunnel, sometimes reaching depths of over 300 feet. These shafts served two critical purposes. They provided ventilation for the diggers, and most importantly, they were used to remove the countless tons of spoil from the main horizontal tunnel being carved out far below. The true marvel of the Qanat is its breathtakingly simple and passive design. The entire system operates on gravity alone. The gently sloping tunnel, painstakingly carved through rock and soil, allows the water to flow steadily from the high-elevation aquifer to the low-lying fields and settlements without a single pump or ounce of external energy. By running entirely underground, the Qanat solves the twin demons of arid climates, evaporation and contamination. The water is protected from the scorching sun, ensuring that almost every drop that enters the tunnel reaches its destination, and the earth itself acts as a natural filter, purifying the water as it travels. The point where the tunnel finally emerges into the open air is called the Majar, and it was often a place of community gathering, a life-giving oasis created from nothing but human ingenuity and the pull of the earth. A single Qanat could stretch for dozens of miles, supporting thousands of people and creating a ribbon of green fertility in the desert that could last for centuries. This knowledge was not static. It was a sophisticated craft passed down from master to apprentice within families of Mukanis. These were the unsung engineer heroes of the ancient world. They could read the land like a map, understanding soil composition and water tables intuitively. They knew how to reinforce tunnels to prevent collapses and how to perform the delicate maintenance required to keep the channels clear of silt and debris. This was a sacred trust, as the survival of entire cities like Persepolis and countless agricultural communities depended on their expertise. The technology was so effective that it didn't just stay in Persia. It spread along the Silk Road, transforming landscapes and enabling civilizations across the Middle East, into North Africa, and as far as Spain and China. Wherever the Qanat went, it brought not just water, but life, stability, and the foundation for complex society. Its decline, therefore, is one of the great paradoxes of so-called progress. The Qanat did not fail. It was made to seem obsolete. The advent of powerful, fossil fuel-powered electric pumps in the 20th century offered a seductive alternative. Why spend years and immense communal effort digging a tunnel when a machine could drill a deep well and bring water to the surface in a matter of days? The modern pump was fast, individualistic, and promised immediate gratification. Nations undergoing rapid modernization embraced this new technology, subsidizing pumps and electricity for agriculture. But this short-term solution has led to a long-term catastrophe. The unchecked pumping of groundwater has caused aquifers to be drained at an alarming rate, leading to land subsidence, where the very ground collapses, and the permanent loss of ancient water reserves. The Qanat, by its very nature, was sustainable. It only drew as much water as the aquifer could naturally recharge. The pump, however, is a tool of extraction, designed to take as much as possible as quickly as possible. The loss of the Qanat is thus a double tragedy. We are not only losing the physical systems themselves, as many ancient tunnels collapse from neglect, but we are also losing the human knowledge required to build and maintain them. The last generation of master Mukanis is aging, and few young people are entering a profession that has been rendered seemingly redundant by technology. We abandoned a system that worked in perfect harmony with the environment for one that is fundamentally exploitative and ultimately self-destructive. The haunting lesson of the Qanat is that efficiency is not always about speed and power. Sometimes true efficiency is about patience, sustainability, and working within the natural order. This brilliant, subterranean solution to one of humanity's oldest challenges makes the final loss on our list all the more poignant, as we move from mastering the hidden waterways of the earth to conquering the vast, trackless highways of the sea. From the sustainable genius of underground Qanats, we arrive at our final vanished technology, one that conquered not the hidden world below, but the terrifyingly empty vastness of the open sea. The Phoenicians were the undisputed masters of the ancient Mediterranean, a civilization whose wealth and power were built not on vast armies or sprawling farmland, but on their unparalleled skill as sailors and merchants. From their bustling port cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, their sleek, nimble ships ventured where others dared not go, establishing trade routes from the tin mines of Cornwall in Britain to the spice markets of Arabia and the ivory coasts of North Africa. They were the supply chain of the ancient world, but their greatest asset wasn't the cargo they carried, it was the secret knowledge of how to navigate the trackless blue wilderness to get it there. This maritime prowess was their state secret, a proprietary advantage so valuable they guarded it with a policy of deliberate and ruthless secrecy, ensuring that the maps, the techniques, and the tools of their trade would vanish with them, leaving behind one of history's most enduring nautical mysteries. So what exactly did they know that everyone else didn't? Without compasses or satellites, Phoenician navigation was a breathtaking synthesis of art, science, and raw, accumulated experience. During the day, they were masters of piloting, using a deep, intimate knowledge of coastal landmarks, water depth, and even the color and temperature of the sea to guide them. But their true genius was revealed under the night sky. They were almost certainly celestial navigators, using the stars as their fixed reference points in a seemingly chaotic world. The North Star, Polaris, was their most trusted guide, holding a steady position in the northern heavens, but they likely went far beyond this single marker. Some historians suggest they may have used simple, early versions of the astrolabe or cross staff to measure the angle of specific stars above the horizon, allowing them to estimate their latitude, their north-south position. This knowledge wasn't written down in easy-to-steal manuals. It was memorized, encoded in songs, stories, and complex star charts that were passed down orally from master navigator to apprentice within closed guilds. Their understanding extended beyond the heavens and into the water itself. They possessed what can only be called an early form of oceanography, holding mental maps of the Mediterranean's complex currents and prevailing wind patterns like the seasonal Etesian winds. They understood the habits of migratory birds and could read the presence of distant land in the types of seaweed floating on the surface or the specific birds that came to rest on their ships. Some tantalizing, though debated, theories even suggest they might have had a primitive form of the magnetic lodestone, a precursor to the compass, though no physical evidence has ever been found. Their ships themselves were technological marvels, built with a clinker design of overlapping planks that made them strong and flexible enough to withstand Atlantic gales, a construction secret other cultures struggled to replicate. Every piece of this knowledge, the astronomical, the oceanic, the meteorological, was a closely held trade secret, because in the cutthroat world of ancient commerce, information was the ultimate currency. To reveal your route was to surrender your monopoly, your wealth, and your power. The complete and final loss of this vast repository of knowledge was a direct result of their civilization's catastrophic and total destruction. The Phoenician cities, though wealthy, were small and perpetually caught between the grinding wheels of much larger empires, first Assyria, then Babylon, and finally Alexander the Great. The death blow came in 332 BC when Alexander laid siege to the island city of Tyre for 7 brutal months. After finally breaching its walls, his army unleashed a fury of destruction, slaughtering thousands, selling tens of thousands more into slavery, and razing the legendary city to the ground. This was not just a military defeat, it was a cultural and intellectual extermination. The master navigators, the shipwrights, the chart makers, the living libraries of Phoenician maritime science were killed, enslaved, or scattered to the winds. The intricate, orally transmitted chains of knowledge were shattered beyond repair. The secrets that had guided their ships safely across thousands of miles of ocean for centuries died with them on the burning shores of Tyre. Later civilizations, like the Greeks and Romans, adopted and adapted the remnants of Phoenician ship design and maybe a few basic concepts of celestial navigation, but the full, sophisticated system, the deep why and how, was gone forever. The Mediterranean, once a Phoenician lake, became a little more mysterious, a little more dangerous for everyone who sailed it after. What ties all these astonishing stories together is a sobering realization about the nature of knowledge itself. It is not a permanent, ever-growing mountain that we steadily climb. Instead, it is more like a delicate ecosystem, a vast and intricate web that can thrive for centuries, but one that is also vulnerable to collapse. The disappearance of these 21 technologies reveals a recurring pattern of fragility, where brilliant innovations can be erased by a handful of predictable yet devastating forces. The most dramatic cause is, without a doubt, societal collapse. The fall of empires like Rome, the Han Dynasty, or the Byzantine Empire acts like a cognitive earthquake. It shatters the complex structures that support advanced knowledge, specialized workshops, funded research, libraries, and the stable trade routes that supply rare materials. When the central authority that pays for aqueducts and bathhouses vanishes, the engineers who understand hydraulics and the chemistry of concrete find themselves without patrons. Their sophisticated skills become redundant in a world that has suddenly reverted to a struggle for basic survival. The knowledge isn't just forgotten. The very society that needed it ceases to exist, and the intricate chain of apprenticeship that passed down this tacit, hands-on understanding is broken in a single generation. A dark age isn't just a period without light, it is a period of profound forgetting. But sometimes the threat comes from within, in the form of obsessive secrecy. Technologies like Greek fire or Phoenician navigation were so valuable to the states that developed them that they were treated as ultimate secrets, known only to a tiny, protected elite. This strategy of compartmentalization can be a brilliant short-term advantage, but it is a catastrophic long-term risk. It places the entire fate of a revolutionary idea in the hands of a few individuals. If those few individuals are killed in a siege, like the masters of Greek fire in Constantinople, or if they are enslaved and scattered without having taught their apprentices, like the Phoenician navigators after the fall of Tyre, the technology doesn't just fade away, it vanishes in an instant. The secret dies with its last keeper, transforming a powerful reality into an unverifiable legend. And then there is the quieter, more insidious cause, simple replacement. This is perhaps the most subtle and relevant danger for our own time. A technology doesn't have to be worse to be abandoned. The Viking Sunstone was an incredibly effective navigational tool, but the magnetic compass was easier to mass-produce and required less specialized skill to use. The intricate, sustainable Qanat systems provided water for millennia, but the electric water pump was faster to install and offered immediate, individual control. When a new method is cheaper, easier, or more convenient, we often embrace it with little thought for the nuanced benefits of the old. We trade sustainability for speed, durability for convenience, and deep mastery for shallow accessibility, often without fully understanding the long-term trade-offs we are making. This isn't malice, it's just the relentless and often short-sighted march of what we call progress. The collective impact of these losses is more than just a list of fascinating what-ifs. It represents a recurring cultural amnesia, a forgetting of our own capabilities. Each time one of these technologies disappears, humanity is forced to reinvent the wheel, sometimes literally. The precision gearwork of the Antikythera Mechanism had to be rediscovered over a millennium later. The self-healing properties of Roman concrete are only now being decoded by modern scientists with electron microscopes. This cycle of discovery, loss, and rediscovery has cost us centuries of potential advancement. It forces a profound humility upon us, challenging the arrogant notion that our modern world represents the absolute peak of human innovation. The past is not a simple, linear prologue to our present. It is a landscape littered with abandoned peaks of achievement that we are only now struggling to climb again. This is why these stories are not mere historical curiosities. They are urgent lessons. They teach us the immense value of preserving knowledge not in secret vaults, but in open, distributed, and durable forms. They champion the wisdom of sustainable design, showing us that solutions which work in harmony with nature, like the Qanat or Amazonian dark earth, can outlast and outperform those that seek to dominate it. Most importantly, they remind us that progress is not inevitable. It requires a conscious, collective effort to maintain the libraries, the schools, the apprenticeships, and the cultural values that protect our shared understanding of the world. By studying these vanishments, we are not just looking backward, we are looking forward, arming ourselves with the wisdom to avoid repeating the same mistakes and perhaps, just perhaps, rediscovering a brilliant idea from the past that holds the key to a better future. We've journeyed together through 21 astonishing chapters of forgotten genius, from the celestial gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the star-guided ships of the Phoenicians. Each story is more than just a historical footnote. It's a powerful reminder that human progress is not a straight line marching inevitably forward, but a complex, winding river with countless lost tributaries and abandoned oxbows. These vanished technologies challenge the very core of how we view our ancestors, forcing us to replace the image of primitive strugglers with one of brilliant, adaptable problem solvers who often achieved harmony with their world in ways we are still struggling to learn. This exploration does more than just satisfy our curiosity. It fundamentally reshapes our understanding of history itself. The past isn't just a static record of what happened. It's a dynamic, unfinished puzzle where most of the pieces are missing. We have to learn to see the gaps not as empty spaces, but as invitations to wonder, to question, and to imagine what else might have been. The silent, mortar-less walls of Inca fortresses, the self-healing Roman concrete submerged in seawater, the fertile black earth of the Amazon, these aren't just relics. They are messages from the past, offering us proven solutions to modern problems like sustainable construction, resilient infrastructure, and regenerative agriculture. Sometimes the most cutting-edge innovation isn't about inventing something entirely new, but about rediscovering a path we walked down long ago and then forgot. That's why your perspective is so valuable. This conversation doesn't end when the video does. I'm genuinely curious to know which of these lost technologies captured your imagination the most. Was it the nanochemistry of the Lycurgus Cup, changing color with a magic we still can't fully replicate? Or the terrifying spectacle of Greek fire, a weapon so potent its secret died with an empire? Perhaps it was the quiet, sustainable genius of the Qanat systems, offering a lesson in water management we desperately need to relearn today. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this exploration going as a community. What do you think is still out there, waiting to be unearthed in a sunken ship, a buried library, or a misunderstood text? If these glimpses into forgotten worlds have sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing to the channel. There are so many more mysteries to unravel together, from lost cities and undeciphered scripts to other incredible inventions that time forgot. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the shadows of history. Keep asking questions, stay curious about the world around you, and never stop wondering about the incredible, hidden depths of our shared human story. The greatest discoveries, after all, might not be in front of us but waiting patiently behind for us to finally see them for what they are.